Transit Commission audiocast test.
Good morning, everyone. We do have a quorum, so we're going to get started. I just ask everyone to take their seats. Before we begin today's Transit Commission meeting, we'd like to start with a few remarks to remember the events of September 18th. I would now like to invite Mayor Watson to say a few words.
Good morning. Tomorrow marks 1 year since the collision between the OC Transpo bus and a Via Rail passenger train. On that fatal day, 6 of our neighbors left their homes as they did every day, never to return. Michael Blakeney, Karen Krasuski, Rob Moore, Kyle Nash, Connor Boyd, Dave Woodard. Des dizaines de personnes ont été blessées ce jour-là. And this tragedy is one that no one who was on board route number 76 will ever forget. It's been a difficult year for many. In the weeks following the collision, I, along with so many other residents, went to the funerals and memorials held for the 6 neighbors that we lost. They were good, honest, decent residents of our city. Some so young that most of their lives were yet to be explored, others taken from us while they were in the primes of their lives, and all taken from their families far too soon. On that day and in the days since, our thoughts and prayers have been and continue to remain with the families, loved ones, colleagues, and friends of those who passed away, as well as those who were injured or affected by this tragedy. Même un an plus tard, il est difficile d'accepter qu'une telle injustice se soit produite. But our city has shown resilience. While there is no back to normal for the families affected, they have each shown tremendous resolve to move forward as best they can. It's been a difficult year for the OC Transpo family as well. Remembering their colleague Dave, OC Transpo's drivers have driven on this past year and provided our city with the essential service that they always do. There is nothing that we can do that will ever make up for the void that has been left in these families. But we hope that these gestures will help them know that their city grieves along with them, and we too will never forget. I'd want to take a moment to thank Councillors Harder and Deans for their care, compassion, and leadership that they have both shown during this very sad and challenging time in our city's history. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Watson. Councillor Harder.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Watson and Chair Deans. There has never been, to my recollection, I've lived in Barrhaven for so long, anything that has ever made the community come together and grieve really every day for this past year. You know, I know that anyone I talk to, wherever I go, people know somebody that was on the 76. Yes, for all the neighbors and the friends, and most importantly the family members who lost their loved ones that day. But there were 90 plus people on that bus, and every one of those has family and friends, and all but one of them lived in Barrhaven. It's deeply personal to us, and that's why I'm pleased that we're having the moment of silence today and that we're doing what the families want, which is lowering the flags tomorrow, and that's all. And I've talked to many of them over the past year and more recently, and I know that they count on the support of our city, Mr. Mayor. What you were saying is very important because you know, to have such a profound loss, it really has been deeply moving, and certainly I don't know whether it'll ever be behind us. I don't think it will. And so over the next while, I'm working with the families on a suitable memorial and always thinking about them. Thank you for giving me this time.
Thank you, Councillor Harder. As Chair of the Transit Commission, I too would like to share a few words with you today. Tomorrow will mark 1 year since devastation struck our city, 1 year since 6 precious lives were lost and so many others were affected by this tragedy. For me, September 18th was one of the darkest days of my life. I will never forget the sadness and grief that swept through this city. My heart continues to break for those families who lost loved ones. You are all in my thoughts and in my prayers. In this time of reflection, it is my hope that our most prominent memories are those not of turmoil and sadness and grief, but rather of kindness and of strength. That we remember how, even through such devastation, our city came together as a community to take care of one another and demonstrated what it truly means to be selfless and compassionate. And I saw so much of that in the days after the devastating accident. Today we remember the 6 individuals who are no longer with us. Each of them was loved by many people, and each of them was taken far too soon. We also keep in our thoughts all of those who were injured and all of those whose lives have forever been changed. To their families and friends, on behalf of OC Transpo and the Transit Commission, I would like to offer our most sincere sympathies and condolences. As the coming days and weeks pass, I hope that you feel comforted by the love and support of those who surround you and the memories of those no longer with us. At this time, I ask that all those who are able to please rise and observe a moment of silence in remembrance of the 6 citizens that we lost on September 18th and to support all of the families and friends affected by this tragedy. The caring nature, selflessness, and compassion felt across our city last September continues to be shown in the lives and actions of our transit service employees. I would now like to recognize 3 individuals who have gone above and beyond the call of duty to help someone in need. This acknowledgement is part of the TransSecure program, which is a well-established community watch program on wheels. I am so pleased that all 3 individuals could be here with us today. I would like to invite Jean-Claude, the recipient of the July TransSecure Call of the Month, as well as Michael and Carlos, 2 recipients of the August TransSecure Call of the Month, to come to the podium to accept their certificates. Okay, so So turning then to the agenda, declarations of interest. Seeing none, confirmation of minutes 50 from June 18th. Carried. I do have a short chairs update, so we'll hold that and return to it. Item number 2, update from the general manager. There is no update, so we'll just receive that. Item number 3, status update, Transit Commission inquiries and motions for the period ending September 5th, 2014. Received. Item number 4, 2014 operating and capital budget Q2 Transit Commission status report. There is a public delegation, so we'll hold that and return to it. Item number 5, Q2 2014 Transit Services Performance Report. There's a presentation, so that item will be held. Item number 6, Light Rail Transit System and line names. There is also a presentation, so that item will be held. Item number 7, O-Train Expansion Project Update. And again, there is a presentation, so it will be held. Returning then to item number 1, which is the chair's update. On the afternoon of July 18th, you could feel the excitement throughout a great city as both old and young sports fans boarded OC Transpo buses wearing their Red Blacks jersey, ready for the first game of the season, which we won, by the way. I can tell you from experience that I will not soon forget that day. The atmosphere was absolutely contagious, and I'm so happy that 7,200 attendees chose to travel to the game on OC Transpo buses. That's 30%. That's 30% of the attendees. It means people heard our message that transit is by far the easiest and most convenient option for TD Place event goers, regardless of where you live or where you work. Both OC Transpo and the Transit Commission are looking forward to continuing this fantastic service. During the month of July, the smiles of Riverside South and Barrhaven community members got a little bigger and a little brighter as the much-anticipated Strand-Heard-Armstrong Bridge opened for service. On July 19th, OC Transpo Route 94 and Route 99 were extended across the bridge, providing transit customers with easier access to shopping and schools and new connections to the transitway. This new transit service not only provides customers with new and faster connections between Riverside South and Barrhaven, it also provides improved connections between Riverside South and destinations in the west, such as Algonquin College and Canada, as well as improved connections between Barrhaven and destinations in the east, such as South Keys and Confederation Heights. On August 18th, I once again took part in OC Transpo's Pride Flag raising event to help kick off Ottawa's most colorful festival. I'm so happy that we live in a city that is committed to and cares deeply about the importance of diversity, acceptance, inclusiveness, and self-expression, free of discrimination or hatred. We are a city that believes in inclusiveness and understanding, a city that I am so happy to call my home. And finally, I would like to extend my thanks and appreciation to Mr. Manconi and all of the staff at OC Transpo, as well as my fellow commissioners for all of your hard work throughout the past 4 years. I would especially like to acknowledge our volunteer commissioners for their commitment and dedication to our city. This will be our final Transit Commission meeting in this term of council, and it has been my pleasure to work with all of you to make our transit system even better for the people of Ottawa. We have accomplished a lot over the last 4 years, and together we have reached many milestones. Just a few highlights include the introduction of the Presto Smart Card, a 4-year labor contract with our union partners, and soon we will nearly double the capacity of the O-Train line. I am very proud of the work we have achieved collectively, and I am confident that we are leaving the transit system in excellent shape for the future Transit Commission. That ends my update. Are there any questions? Thank you. Received? Great. Turning then to the first held item, item number 4. It's the 2014 Operating and Capital Budget Q2 Transit Commission Status Report. There is one public delegation I'd like to call Chris Bradshaw. Good morning, Mr. Bradshaw. You have 5 minutes to address the Commission. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have noted that this is your final session of this group, and I wanted to take the opportunity to first make some specific comments about Appendix B to the report that's before you. The first item, would love to have some more information about the focus group that was talked about there in terms of, and the details of that particular program. To understand the importance of it. As a senior, I am very interested in anything that increases the civility and courtesy of people using the transit system. Items 6 and 7 are very useful in that they show the cost of printing. The first, the system map, which comes out to just under 25 cents a piece, and then the maps for the shelters, which comes out to be 45 times that cost, which made me quite suspicious there wasn't further detail there. I'd be interested in getting additional detail there. And finally, item 45 is an item which is the addition of a number of transit shelters. It does not indicate the quantity, so one can't judge what the actual cost of these are. Having gone through the rebuilding, we are not through it yet, on Rideau Street, we have seen a shelter design which is rather nice aesthetically, but is not providing the wind protection around the sides as we would like. So shelter design is quite of interest to me. I would also point out that on a matter that does relate to the finances, that the concept of a distance-sensitive fare structure was mentioned by a candidate at the all-candidates meeting on transportation held for the Rideau Vanier ward on Monday. So I just want to alert that I'm going to be doing some work on that particular thing. It has an opportunity to greatly reduce the complexity of the system and increase its fairness. Finally, the matter of council, the 4 commissioners. I did apply to become a commissioner this time, and I do urge the chair and the members of the committee who advise her to consider a senior to be on the commission as one of the commissioners in the future, to make sure that we are represented by people who have a perspective on using the system other than that peak hour. There is a bias in transit to favor the peak hour traveler first among all, and I think it's very important to listen to other points of view who use the service midday, weekends, and travel with children and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bradshaw. Are there any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you. Received on the report. Okay, item number 5, Transit Services Q2 2014 Performance Report. And Mr. Manconi, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've asked Mr. Scrimger to provide the Transit Commission with a brief PowerPoint presentation summarizing the report.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we just, as you know, we do this report each quarter to show how the operation of OC Transpo has gone during that 3-month period. So the major things we noticed from this period, which is from April to June, is that while ridership in the month and in the quarter is still lower than it was a year before, this is the first time that we have seen annual ridership increasing very slightly. We look at the ridership for the preceding 12 months as something that we can measure every month, and it's not affected by seasonal variation. So we won't say that one observation is a trend, but one observation that is different from all the others is remarkable, and annual ridership has increased slightly. We've had through that quarter stable or slightly improved on-time performance. The number of people using the park and ride lots has increased. We had a lower collision rate than previously, and we had lower fuel consumption than previously. In specific, ridership for the year ending at the end of June, just short of 97 million customer trips, still very high ridership, but not as high as it had been previously, but up just very slightly from the annual ridership measured at the end of May. In the quarter, we carried just short of 23 million customer trips, slightly lower than we had in the second quarter a year earlier, but still at 99% of that level. So the declines in the economy that we were seeing, or at least the declines in employment among people who ride transit, may be flattening out. But we do read that the federal government continues to downsize, and since we carry more of our customers to and from the central area, and many of the workers in the central part of the city are federal workers, that continues to be of concern to us. For on-time performance, our regular service was on time 68% of the time in the morning rush hour. Express buses were on time 86% of the time. That's slightly better than we were the year before, and we have fewer buses running early on regular service. In the afternoon, when congestion is a little more challenging, regular service runs at 59% and express service at 68%, fairly stable compared to the previous year. Some of the other highlights: park and ride use. We have the highest park and ride use we've ever seen, and this follows the opening of 2 new park and ride lots, Nepean Woods at Strandherd and Woodruff, and Ray Friel off 10th line. Collisions were considerably lower than they had been in the first quarter, possibly related to the better weather. Less fuel consumed compared to the previous year. Higher rated ride comfort. We have people who ride on the buses and rate the score, and by those continuously comparable measures, customers are receiving more comfortable rides than they were the year before. Service delivery remains high, with at or over 99.5% of trips operated, and the low failure rate of the vehicles continues at that same low rate. So those are all the points I have, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scrimgeour. Commissioner Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the on-time performance, one person was asking me that sometimes these buses are chronically late. If they're chronically late, are you actually adapting the actual schedule so that if you know with all the construction that for a period of time it's going to be almost always have these buses late, that you actually adjust it so they can have more of an idea when the bus is coming? It's a great frustration when it comes sometimes 10, 20, 30 minutes late, and waiting for that is, especially as winter's coming on, is quite difficult for people. And particularly from downtown going back, because we show the afternoon is the worst.
Yes, Madam Chair, we do make adjustments to all trips, whether they are, if there's any operating trouble with that trip. If anything is running consistently late by any number of minutes, we'll make all the adjustments we can. If anything is running consistently late by anything like the number of minutes that the councillor is talking about, we make changes as soon as we can, generally within the first couple of weeks of the new season.
So you don't have to wait for the next round to make those adjustments?
No, we do not.
How do you notify people of those adjustments? Do you put a takeoff on the buses that they use, or something that they could know ahead of time that changes are happening?
Our first priority is to change the way that the trip operates, change the vehicle that provides that trip by changing our internal schedule so that there's no need to change any information to customers. If we ever have to, we put that information out to them on buses and through our normal alert process, but that's very rare. Usually it's to change the internal operations so that the trip can run at or very close to its planned and advertised time.
Is that to make it come on the time that's in the schedule now, or is that to just make sure that it operationally works? I understand that has to happen, but the people who use the buses regularly don't necessarily go to your website every week to check the times.
Oh, but if there's ever a change to to a scheduled and advertised time, which happens very, very rarely, maybe a couple of times in the last year. We'll put notices out to people who ride the bus, and we'll send out the alerts to people who've subscribed to the alert service. But that's very rare.
So it's the afternoon times. It says it's stable, but it's still 59% and 68%. It's pretty low compared to the morning. Then people, I guess, are fresher or something. I'm not sure why the difference so much, but is there an attempt being made to try to get the afternoon on time to at least match the morning times?
Yes, we're continuously trying to do that, but most of that rests with the broader city and the people who live in the city, how they drive their cars, how they congest the roads, and we're very affected right now, and will continue to be increasingly so over the next few years, by the Confederation Line construction. We're very affected by congestion at the east portal at the corner of Nicholas and Laurier. So everyone at the city is working together along with the contractor to keep car traffic out of the way of bus traffic at that intersection, but we don't always succeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilkinson. Commissioner Bloss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to comment on early or late runs because I think we beat that to death, and I don't think we have quite the handle on it that we need to have, but it remains a concern. But I do want to talk about ridership a little bit because we keep tying our ridership figures to what the economy is doing and what employment is doing. And at the last year, when I pointed out that overall employment in Ottawa-Gatineau had actually overall employment had actually improved from December 2012, and we weren't really, but we were still saying that employment rates were working counter to improving ridership, and they were actually going in opposite directions. And I think your answer at that point was that that it was the public service employment that was really affecting us. And I agree with you that I think different types of jobs, different types of employees, some are more inclined to use transit. But I don't know if you saw the latest report coming out that indicated that federal jobs or public service jobs in Ottawa have actually increased in the past year, as opposed to what that prevailing notion is that all these massive cuts have happened, and that a lot of those cuts have actually happened in the outer lying area. So are you taking that into account when you look at how employment affects ridership?
Madam Chair, there's a couple of points there. First of all, it is that the greatest number of people who use transit are people who work in the central part of the city, at the higher density areas, the places where car travel is not competitive with transit, and that means primarily downtown workers or workers in the broader downtown. Many of those workers are federal workers. So we're not saying that when ridership goes down, it's because employment is down in the city. We're saying that ridership goes down when central area employment goes down, which it has been. The second point is that, yes, we've seen those figures of increasing federal employment in the region. Those were in the summer. So we will be looking to see the effect on those as we do our third quarter report later this year. What we're reporting on in this is what we saw during the second quarter of the year, and that employment increase happened later in the year.
I guess my point, though, is that we've got to be careful that we don't just say unemployment's gone up, ridership's going down because there are fewer people working. The fact actually is the unemployment rate, and there's almost a bit of a paradox here. Even when the unemployment rate goes up, it's mainly because there are more people going into the workforce looking for work. So you've actually had, in months that we have had, and especially where the 3-month average is being used, where we've had increases in unemployment, we've actually had more people working, but we've also had more people looking for work. So it's the overall workforce and the people who want to be in the workforce that have increased. So what I'm saying is, at some point, the challenge is, how do we capture all those new people who are working or people that weren't in the workforce before? And even people who are looking for work still need to take transit to go to different things, whether it's appointments. I think what we're missing that challenge, saying, hey, there are more people out there working, there are more people looking for work. How come our ridership isn't increasing proportionally?
Madam Chair, of course, the challenge of showing people, letting people decide whether they should use transit or not continues, whether those people are working downtown or whether those people are working in other areas or whether those people are looking for work. What we have reported to you on is that when ridership goes up, when ridership goes down, it is doing so consistently with employment levels. 85% of the variation in employment, in ridership, whether it has gone up or whether it has gone down, is consistent with the number of people who are working, not the employment or unemployment rate, but the number of people who are working in Ottawa and in Gatineau. So all of those things that the councillor says are true, and what we're explaining here is that when ridership goes up, when ridership goes down, it's almost entirely the result of the number of people working in the city and very little the result of anything else.
Okay. Of course, I won't mention optimization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Blois. Seeing no further questions received on the presentation. Thank you. Item number 6, light rail transit system and line names. And Mr. Scrimger, I think I'll turn this back over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report is about the image and the top level of the wayfinding information that we will give to customers as they use the rail components of our transit system. And what I hope to do in this presentation is show you, first of all, why that's very important, and second, explain to you the recommendations we have. So first of all, just a couple of slides of background to show how this comes to the Commission. Council assigned in 2013 the Commission the oversight for operational matters for the Confederation Line, including wayfinding and branding. And just at that same time, actually a little earlier, the Commission had established an ad hoc working group from among its members to work with staff on these issues as they come up. And we'd been through some of these last year as we got the Commission's approval for the names of the stations on the Confederation Line. Two other points of history on the names. In 2001, shortly before it opened, the name O-Train was selected as the name for the north-south rail line operating between Bayview and Greenboro. That up until that point, that service hadn't had a name. And in December 2012, Council selected the name Confederation Line at the same time that they made the final approvals for the project to be the name of the east-west rail line between Blair and Tunney's Pasture during the construction period, but left to the Commission the responsibility of choosing the name once the service was in operation. So I want to talk about naming the rail component of the transit system and explaining that this is an important and really a permanent decision for the city. Every transit system that has a rail rapid transit service has a unified name for the rail component of its complete system. It's a generic name that people use in easy conversation. It becomes part of the vocabulary of the city. It distinguishes the rail service from all of the other parts of the complete transit system, including the bus service. And you can imagine it. I will be riding the blank to get to City Hall today, or I'll be taking the blank to get to Tunney's Pasture. It's important to have a strong identity for a line that, especially for a line that runs underground, because people who might be considering traveling by transit don't see the trains as they're moving. On the surface, we walk towards the bus stop. You see the buses go by. You know where the bus is. When we move to an underground system, the trains are invisible to you. You have to have a really strong focal point on where you're walking to the entrance. So here's some examples of how this vocabulary has evolved in some other cities. In Toronto, the TTC is the name of the complete transit system. The subway is the name of the rail system, the underground system. In Montreal, the STM has the Metro, and everyone's called it the Metro since it opened. In Vancouver, TransLink has the SkyTrain. Move to other cities around the world, MTA, New York City Transit, it's the subway, and everyone knows the subway. In London, Transport for London is the agency. The Underground is the Underground Railway, two separate technologies. Most people colloquially call it the tube, colloquially. In Paris, the RATP, the major part of that system, the rail system, is the metro. And in other cities in Canada, Calgary, the rail system is called the C train. In Edmonton, they call it the LRT. And in Waterloo Region, under construction now, sort of our sister agency in building a new rail line in Ontario right now, they've decided it's called the ION. So what we recommend for Ottawa is extending the existing name that we have for the one line in our rail system to encompass both lines of the rail system. So we recommend that the whole system, the rail lines, be called the O-Train. And that would include both the north-south line that we now call the O-Train and the east-west line that doesn't as yet have a generic name part of a system. The name O-Train's been in use since 2001, as we know, very well known by transit customers. It's become, over the years I've watched it, become much more familiar to Ottawa residents, and visitors to the city learn it quickly. It's very easily distinguished. It doesn't become confused with any other part of the transportation system in Ottawa, and it's easily read and understood in both languages. So the comparable slide for Ottawa, similar to the ones you saw from the other cities, would be that Ottawa has the O-Train as part of OC Transpo, and that identity would go on the north-south line and the east-west line. So it would be, you can see it in the middle, how it's labeling the station at Bayview, and it's also a sub-brand on the train. The next part, if we, once we can decide on a system name, is to find the identities for each individual line in the system. They need to be clear. We need to be able to give information about, are we talking about one line or the other, and we need to do it in a really a symbolic way. Cities identify their lines all sorts of ways, many of them by number, by letter, by name, by color. Here's a list of some of those same cities that we saw earlier. In Toronto, they're traditionally been given descriptive names of the streets that the subway lines run under, but they're now being given numbers as well to make customer information easier. In Montreal, the lines of the metro system are distinguished by their color, the color they're given on the map and the color that the wayfinding information through the stations uses. The SkyTrain in Vancouver, the three lines there are given names, and they're symbolic names. They're not descriptive in any way. The London Underground, each line has a name. Some of them are descriptive, some of them are symbolic or commemorative. The New York City subway uses numbers or letters. They have two, like the London Underground, like the Ottawa system, two separate technologies. In New York, they label one system with letters, one system with numbers, and everyone knows they're going to ride the N train. But there's other things like the 4, 5, 6 trains all run in the same tunnel, and they use the same color, even though they go to different places and they have different line number designations. The metro in Paris, each line is numbered, and colors are also used for the maps and as a secondary identifier. In Calgary, not in the same, like Ottawa, not in the same league as Paris, but we can use examples of large cities and small cities. The lines were previously known by the directions they traveled, but now they're called by colors, with some of the information using numbers. And Edmonton, as they're getting ready to open their second line and getting ready to build their third line, they've chosen to use names for each of the lines. So they have the first line that's been running for 35 years now is going to be the Capital Line, the new line going to the North Metro Line, and the line that they're about to start building, the Valley Line. Here's some examples of the way that information appears on customer information. At the top, you can see a map of the Toronto subway showing the 4 lines there, showing the numbers that they're using now, the colors, and in very small letters, there's a legend that shows the name for each of the lines. The Vancouver system at the bottom left, the 3 lines are shown there, each in a different color, and with the line name beside them. Montreal metro system on the right-hand side, showing the colors and quite bold on those, the endpoints of each line. Over on the next page, some of the larger transit systems in the world. You can see the London Underground at the top, and on the right-hand side, a list of the names they have for each one of the lines that make up the complete underground system. In the middle, a piece of the New York map showing the different colors, and over on the right-hand side, the different symbols, colors, letters, and numbers that they use to identify each one of the services. And at the bottom, the Paris Metro, and on the right-hand side, you can see each of the I guess there's actually 16 lines, given a different number and also a different color to distinguish them on the map. So, having looked at all of those and having worked with the Commission's working group, what we're recommending now is that each of the two lines, the east-west line and the north-south line, be given a primary identity, which is a name. That's consistent with the best practices in other cities, London, Vancouver, and Edmonton, as we saw. It's consistent with the Council decision on the Confederation line. These could be symbolic names. We found that descriptive names don't work with the Ottawa geography, the way these lines are laid out, the way our city is laid out. But having a separate name for each line allows for clarity. We want these names to be distinct from other parts of the transportation system so they're not confusing. And we continue to use numbers and colors as secondary identifiers. For maps, we need to show the lines in color. Wayfinding signs, the color can direct you in the right area. Numbers still needed to show which train you're talking about, or to punch a number into the web page to pull up a schedule. So on naming the east-west line between Tunney's Pasture and Blair, Council selected the name Confederation Line for the construction period. Council did that on the basis that the name marked the importance of the development of Canada, the development of Ottawa as the capital, and it marked the substantial completion of the light rail line in the year of the sesquicentennial of Confederation. And we're seeing that that name, the Confederation Line, is becoming well recognized during the construction period, to the point that we believe it would be unnecessarily confusing to customers and residents if any other name were chosen to be the permanent name for the line. So we recommend that the Commission endorse Council's previous decision and continue the name Confederation Line, Ligne de la Confédération, for the east-west line. Then we move on to naming the north-south line. It's currently identified as the O train. And so first of all, we're proposing to extend that identity of the O train to be the name for the complete system. But even if we weren't doing that, the name O train would not be a suitable name in a transit system for more than one rail line, because it doesn't distinguish that line from any other line. So we prepared a list of criteria and generated a list of candidate names to guide the working group and help them to focus their selection. Some of the criteria were that the name must be easily read and understood in both languages. The name must be unambiguous, avoiding confusion with the Confederation Line, if that's the name chosen, and with other parts of the transportation system. And what the working group recommends is that the north-south line be called the Trillium Line, Ligne Trillium. So like the Confederation Line, this is a symbolic name. It's not descriptive of anything. It makes reference to the provincial flower, so it makes indirect reference to the valuable role of the province in the development of Ottawa and its transit system. And we also point out that with every name we have it reviewed by French language services to ensure that that name, Trillium, Ligne Trillium, works equally as well in both languages. So if these are the names chosen, this drawing shows what the rail system map, just the rail system map, can look like, and the kind of information that we would start to present to customers, showing the east-west line. Here we're showing it in the color red and with the number 1. The north-south line, marked as the Trillium Line, we're showing it here in green. And you can see that we're following a well-trod path, consistent, simple map that provides the information that customers need. But we'll be working on that further, along with the consultants from RTG, over the years to come as we build the Confederation Line stations. So just to sum up, the 3 recommendations in this report are that the Commission approve O-Train as the name of the complete rail system making up both lines, and that the names Confederation Line and Trillium Line be approved as the names of the two lines. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scrimgeour, for your presentation. Before we go to questions from the Transit Commission members, we do have one public delegation. I'm going to call them now. It's Javone Nicholas. Good morning, Mr. Nicholas. You have 5 minutes to address the Commission. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my name is Javon Nicholas. I am a candidate running in Ward 13, Rideau Rockcliffe. So for those of you who are standing for re-election, I wish you all the best in your respective contests. I do wish to speak in partial support of the recommendation, support of recommendation number 1, but not number 2 and 3. So I do believe that, yes, O-Train is a good name for the overall rail system, but I actually believe that for the individual lines that we should be putting numbers and colors primary and names secondary. So please permit me to explain. In knocking on a lot of doors, I'm not convinced that the term Confederation Line is very well known among residents, and people just refer to it as the light rail, LRT, the train. I mean, yes, we have been referring to Confederation in official documents, but I don't think it has really caught on yet. And when we look at other cities where names have been used, I don't think the situation is analogous. I mean, we have the good fortune in Ottawa where the lines are going to be relatively straight, east-west or north-south. If we look at Vancouver, the lines go in multiple directions. They curve quite a bit. It's not a straight unidirectional pattern, and so a name does fit a bit more appropriately. If we look at London, England, which was shown, those names are historical because all the lines used to be privately owned by different companies, and so they have kept those names. They were the original competing names when the lines were competing with each other. And if you look at the examples of Toronto and Calgary, as was just mentioned, they are actually moving away from names and moving to more simplicity with numbers and colors. I mean, in Toronto, the very awkwardly named Young University Spadina line, people simply just say the Young line, the Spadina trains, when they're moving around on the TTC. And so I really believe that we should be saying, that this is line 1, red, and line 2, green. And I take note of one of the first slides in the presentation. It said, quote, I will be riding the blank to get there. If I had to make a prediction of how riders are going to refer to the new rail system, someone might say, okay, well, take the bus to the green line, go up to Bayview Station, and transfer to the red line. I'm a bit skeptical that people will say, take the bus to the Trillium Line, then go northbound to Bayview, transfer to the Confederation Line, and go eastbound to Blair. I find that somewhat awkward and somewhat not intuitive. I think wayfinding needs to be as simple and straightforward as it should be for users, whether they live here or whether they're visitors. And I think that we should still keep the number and color system as proposed by the OC Transpo, but keep the names Confederation and Trillium in a more ceremonial manner. I mean, we can still have the themes of the public art, for example, in all of the stations as envisioned, following the themes of Confederation. So on the red line, then all of the art could take national images, national symbols. On the green line, the Trillium, all of the station public art could again take provincial images, provincial symbols. So we can still have it as an official recognition, but I think on a day-to-day basis, people will be much more comfortable at ease using numbers and colors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. Any questions for the delegation? Commissioner Boy, was that for the delegation? No. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll now return to questions to staff, and we'll start with Commissioner Bly.
Thanks very much. Would you mind putting the system map back up, the last slide or second last slide? Thanks. So generally, I don't really have a lot of concern. I think once the system is built, the populace will decide what to call it. They'll either call it the red line or the green line, or the east line and the north line, or Confed, or they'll come up with nicknames. That's what happens with everything. I'm more curious about what, in stage 2, as we extend west, there's a spur that goes to Bayshore, and then the rest of it goes down to Algonquin. Have you given any thought as to how that will be articulated? Will it be Confed line Algonquin, Confed line Bayshore, or like, what were your thoughts on that?
Madam Chair, yes, we've thought about that for a considerable length of time, and there's a pretty common approach to this in transit around the world, that we would select the way that confuses customers the least. Having a branch that splits into will always mean that people have to know what's different between the two. But people who are traveling to any of the common points, including, in our case, if you were traveling all the way from Place d'Orléans to Lincoln Fields, you don't need to know which of the two it is. So the majority of people are traveling on the common section. It's a small number of people who are affected by the need to know the choice. And what that would lead us to is it's one line with two destinations. There would be a Confederation train, a Red Line train, a Line 1 train, whatever it's called, to Bayshore,
Sure.
and one to Baseline. In the other direction, when you're leaving Bayshore Baseline, you just get on the only train that's there. Nobody traveling east needs to know anything except whether that train's turning back at Herdman, Blair, or Place d'Orléans. The other way of doing it, which is what they've done in Vancouver, is that two lines run on the same track, or in New York, where the 456 example I gave, run on the same track. And that's because those, once they're through downtown, or once they're through the common section, they go in quite different locations. Mm-hmm. So they've chosen, in New York, it's a balance. They're all green, even though they're 456. In Vancouver, it's an Expo Line train or a Millennium Line train. But once they get to the junction point where they split, the routes are quite different beyond. So it's just a choice of providing information that's the least confusing.
It'll be similar to the 95 now. 95 Place d'Orléans says 95 Place d'Orléans, 95 trim says 95 trim. This will say Confed Line Algonquin, Confed Line Bayshore, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blake. Commissioner Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on that one, this is concerned. I think that there are going to be two different lines effectively. One will eventually go to Canadian Tire Place. We should look at what the long-term future name of it is. I'd like the idea which they do in Vancouver, where you have alternate trains, because they're going to be going in different directions, and people have to know which one to get on when they're downtown, so it goes to the place they want to go to. And there's 170,000 people supposed to be in Canada by 2031. There's a lot of people going to be going there if the service is good. And so I know we don't have to name it right now. It's not built yet, but I would think that we should be looking at what that line should be called. It shouldn't just be, I get mixed, the 96A, the 96D, the 96C causes huge confusion already, and I've talked to Mr. Monconi about that, about how we might be able to get some changes made, because people say sometimes it goes to Terry Fox and sometimes it doesn't, and they get to the wrong place. You won't want people going the wrong place on the train. So can you put your thinking cap? We don't need it right away, but we will need it before we start construction there, and it's good to have these things done in advance. And it should, I think, be a different color where it splits off, or maybe you have a combined color on the two, but there should be some way of distinguishing. And we'll have basically three, and in the long run, 4 tracks going off the Confederation line. The existing O train, then the extension of Barrhaven, which might be the same one because it's this direct extension, and then, or you could take the direct connection, the one to Bayshore, whichever one you want to use, and have them clearly what they are, because people get confused otherwise, particularly people who don't use the transit that often.
Madam Chair, I just want to assure the Transit Commission that in the planning of this, we've taken the long view. We've actually overlaid Stage 2 and beyond. And that's based on best practices. When you look at New York City, Paris, and the others, you want to take the very, very long view, so you're absolutely correct. The other thing that Mr. Scrimger and the planning team is doing is overlaying the bus interaction and how all that can also be cleaned up in that respect. So it speaks to both what you're raising and what Councillor Blais is raising in terms of the longer view.
So you'll be coming back with recommendations on that aspect of it at a later time then?
At a later time, yes.
Yeah. The other question I had was, there's a lot of people, the O train has become sort of set in language in Ottawa, and that's only for the one track. What kind of publicity are you going to do to get people to start changing their thinking from O train to Trillium Line, or whatever color it is, because I think they'll probably use the colors a lot too, so that by the time that the Confederation line opens, there wouldn't be confusion on which line they're traveling on.
Madam Chair, we have 26 projects, defined projects, that we have to do to do the handoff from the build to the operationalization of the line. And one of them is speaks to how we're going to engage the community in the vocabulary that needs to be used, in the awareness, in building some excitement around that. So we're shaping all of those elements, and it speaks to exactly that. Doing this early approval does two things. One, the builders need it, so the Rio office needs all this so that they can do wayfinding strategies, they can look at the architectural drawings and so forth. And then OC Transpo, from a marketing and a transition approach, we have time is on our side because you're making the decision ahead of time. And so we will transition our customers through that. So the marketing team, once this is approved, is going to put that together, and we start to roll out incrementally over time the changes.
So I was thinking that the Trillium line exists now, so are you going to be starting that change very soon? So people, they'll still call it the O-Train for some time, but if we have signage and things, people will start to get used to it.
Madam Chair, we'll be happy to have them continue to call it the O-Train, because it will be the O-Train. It's just the only existing line of the O-Train. So the transition comes over the next 4 years as we introduce the second O-Train line into the transit system. And it's only by that time that people will be relying on the distinction between the two designations for the two separate lines. So we'll plan that transition. We're not going to, it doesn't take away the name O-Train. It's one of the O-Train lines is in this case, the Trillium line, the north-south line.
I recognize that, but if you start putting at the stations or somewhere in the maps that it's Trillium line of the O-Train, then people start to get used to it. And,
exactly.
And I don't think we have to wait until the other line's open to do that. I think we should be doing it well in advance so people get used to it and used to using the colors and things like that. It just simplifies things when the other line opens, where there's going to be a little bit of confusion.
Madam Chair, I couldn't agree more with the councillor. Once we have a decision from the Commission, this is exactly what we intend to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilkinson. Commissioner Farabee.
Thank you. We have the Confederation line and then a Confederation stop on the Trillium line. Is that not potentially confusing?
Yes, Madam Chair, it is confusing. So what we need to do once we have a direction on naming the system, naming each line, is then work to clear up any discrepancies, and that is one. So we've been considering a number of alternatives of how we can make it clear when people are traveling to Confederation Heights that it's not on the Confederation line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Farabee. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Most of my questions were covered by Councillor Wilkinson, but I do agree with pretty much everything the public delegation said, that based on my international travels, going by color would, I think, be a preferable wayfinding method over name. It minimizes confusion for users, especially with multiple spurs. It facilitates access for tourists who may not speak English or French. That said, I know it's premature. We can make that decision at a later time, which is the primary wayfinding versus secondary, and I'm glad that we have both there. I might just clarify, is the intention of staff with the colors red and green to facilitate wayfinding with the intention to be having the O-Train painted green in the future, or is this simply on the maps?
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify one thing. You make this decision today. We're proceeding with the wayfinding strategy because the Rail Implementation Office needs that. So we're not coming back to clarify how we're going to do the wayfinding in the stations and so forth. We're going to follow the international standards. And just to reassure everyone, colors and numbers will be everywhere in those stations. And so we will meet what that speaker has spoken to. And I believe Commissioner Blais summarized it perfectly. The travelers will figure this out and will adopt whatever vocabulary works for them. There's nothing wrong with what we're proposing here. It's been done in elsewhere. But I just want to clarify, 1, 2, green and red will be used and has to be provided to the Rail Implementation Office because there's architects waiting for that stuff and wayfinding strategies that need to be developed. I'll let Mr. Scrimgeour speak to the other question.
Madam Chair, no, we have no intention of changing the color of any of the vehicles. All of the OC Transpo vehicles are red and white in different combinations. The north-south line runs with trains that are primarily red. The Commission has agreed that the trains in the east-west line are primarily white, but they're all red and white. And I can think of only one transit system which actually paints its vehicles for the color of the name of the designation of the line.
I don't think it could be argued that painting the trains would not help with wayfinding, but I feel that it's premature to get into those details. I do feel that color should be the primary wayfinding method, but I am very pleased that both are being used in addition to numbers, so I certainly won't block consensus on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Egley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In reading the report, on page 3, it says, making this recommendation, staff note the challenge for the next 4 years of making a transition of the O-Train identity from a single line to a complete rail system. And then when you go to the second last page of the report, indicates there's not going to be any financial implications related to this report. And every time we have a challenge at the city, it does seem to cost money. Obviously, this is going to be a rebranding process going forward. So is this to say that this money is already set aside and there's no additional funds? Because I can't see that this process is not going to cost the city any money.
Madam Chair, we, in terms of the Confederation line, the $2.1 billion has wayfinding built into that. And in terms of the marketing and the readjustment and the transition, we will do that within existing funds, because as you know, for the next 3 to 4 years, our number one priority is the transition and operationalizing this line. So there's no other major initiative that we're undertaking that will need to draw on those marketing funds. If there is any extra resources that we'll need, we'll identify that through the annual budgeting process.
So what this really means is, at this point in time, you're saying to us there's no new money?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Egley. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up on one thing that I know has made its way into the presentation and the recommendations that we spoke about in the working group, which was the choice of the colors. And I know we had identified potentially some issues with using red and green together, and I assume that was looked into and addressed, but I just wanted to make sure.
Commissioner Ron, can you speak right into the mic? We're having trouble hearing you.
Yes. So my question again was to follow up on something that we had discussed in the working group, which was the colors, the choice of the colors of the lines. Right now we have in our presentation red and green, which was discussed as a recommendation, but I know there were some concerns about the particular use of those two colors together in terms of potential difficulties that some people with certain vision impairments might have.
Yes, Madam Chair, we did look into that. That was raised in the working group meetings. We did look into that and found that there are best practice around the world provides ways to compensate for that particular type of color blindness. Using the number and name in addition to the color is one way. Repeating the information through the wayfinding and more than just the color is one way. And choosing the particular shade of red and the particular shade of or tone of green that you use on the printed material can also help people to distinguish between the two lines. So we're quite happy with these two colors.
Great. So we've identified a way to make sure that that's not a problem. Perfect. Thank you. I will be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Ron. Commissioner Hobbs.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to take a moment to say how proud I am. When you see the map up on the screen, you start to realize how we are transitioning into a great big city and changing the way we do things, how we get around it. And what we're doing today is very historic in going forward to name these lines. And as part of the ad hoc committee that got together to work on this, I know just how hard and how in-depth OC Transpo worked, and Pat Scrimgeour especially, to look at what happens all over the world and to really examine this, so we will make the best possible decisions today. And I love that we are incorporating something that is meaningful to us as well, that has some intrinsic value as well as just trying to get us around the city on number 1 or 2 or red or green. So I just want to take this opportunity really to say thank you to Chair Deans, who has sat on all these ad hoc committees as well and championed this through our commission here. And thank you very much to all at OC Transfer, Mr. Manconi, Mr. Scrimgeour, all of you that have done so much work. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hobbs. Commissioner Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, we've heard a lot of discussions about numbers and colors and all that sort of stuff, and I think we've heard the term a camel is a horse designed by a committee, and we don't want a camel, we want that horse. So I'm going to be fully supporting what they presented here today. You've put a lot of time and a lot of thought into this. I think it's going to work very well for the city, and I just want to, just like my colleague Councillor Hobbs, echo what a great job you've done on this project so far, and I hope it continues as we progress towards 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tierney. Commissioner Cadre.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just one question for clarification. In terms of comments from the working group that you did receive or worked with the group, did you receive any comments from public at all besides the working group, like from the outside public?
Madam Chair, yes, we've received some comments from different people over the years. Some of that was stimulated a year ago by the naming of the stations, where people had ideas about what the line would be called, and some of that was stimulated by Council's decision previously to name the Confederation line through the construction period. So those comments, as they've come into OC Transpo, have come to the team that's worked on this, and we've considered them all.
Thank you for that, Mr. Scrimgeour. The other question related to that is from the working group itself. How popular, or, what percentage of the working group challenged in terms of the naming of the project, whether there should be a name or whether it should be color? Was that ever discussed on the table? I'm sure it was, but I just want to get the feel of the working group. Were they happy with the decision, obviously, that's come into committee this morning, but was there open discussion about the coloring of the route instead?
It might be for the chair to say more, but my impression of those meetings that we had on this subject, going back probably a year, was that we talked about all of these options. We talked about colors, we talked about names, we talked about letters, we talked about different types of names, we talked about different types of confusion. We looked at 50 probably different examples of how lines are named and systems are named around the world, and we probably looked at a dozen different candidates for naming these lines. So there was a lot of work put in by that working group, and they considered a lot of options.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scrimgeour. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Cadre. Seeing no further questions, and I agree with that, by the way. There was a lot of work went into it, and it looks easy when you see it on paper, but it's actually quite complex in finding the right name for the line, and hopefully time will prove that we have done a good job. I guess we'll have to wait and see about that. So carried on the recommendations? Carried. Okay, turning into our final agenda item, which is the O-Train expansion project update, and I think Mr. Holder is going to take us through this presentation. I'll just give him a second to get set. You're going to have to speak into the mic.
Chair, I guess I would start by saying there is a correction to the title. Now that we've formally announced that the new title is the Trillium Line, we can talk about the Trillium Line project update. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the Trillium project and talk about the status as we are now and the work that's required moving forward to revenue service. So as a background, in June 2011, Council approved the O-Train expansion project. The benefits include increased capacity in response to rising demand. More frequent service will increase the number of passengers who will use the O-Train as part of their daily commute, and will provide alternative transit options during the detour of the transitway for Confederation Line construction. So this map indicates some of the impacts during the Confederation Line. So we have on the east side there the big arrow, which indicates the transit customers traveling from the southeast to downtown or points west. They will be able to use the expanded service to avoid the East End transitway detour. And then on the west side, we have the transit customers from the southwest and who are traveling downtown and points east, and they'll benefit from the increased service and avoid the west transitway detour. So the O-Train expansion project included the following elements. There was the purchase of 6 Alstom Lint trains. There was construction of 2 new passing tracks. We have an upgraded signalling system. At Walkley Yard, we have the construction of a new de-icing and wash bay. There were station upgrades, and the installation of a sound attenuation barrier at Sawmill Private is underway. So this just indicates where one of the passing tracks is in the north, in the Gladstone area. It's called the Breeze Hill siding, and it's generally to the south of Somerset Street. And the other siding, which is in the Brookfield area, it's called the Sawmill siding, and that's just to the south of the Confederation Station. And this indicates from track level what the Sawmill siding looks like. So we can see the through line with the nice shiny rails, because it's in use pretty much 24 hours a day, and then the passing track there is on the right, waiting for the new trains. This is a photograph of Walkley Yard, and it shows the new lint train sets at the new de-icing and train wash facility. So in terms of the work that we're currently in the phase of operational readiness as we lead into the new service. So there is a number of tasks that form part of this operational readiness phase. We have a safety management system risk assessment, which is now complete and is going to be filed very shortly, mid-September. We have specification revisions for track maintenance, signal maintenance, and rail traffic control services. That is complete. Specification revisions for train maintenance services, which is also complete. We have the extension of the current Bombardier contract until the end of November, which is complete. There is the track maintenance, signal maintenance, and rail traffic control contract renewal RFP, which will be ready by the end of September. And then there is the train maintenance contract renewal RFP, which is also due end of September. Continuing with this phase, we have the revisions to the Canadian Rail operating rules and the operator's manual to reflect the change to the 4-car service. This is due in September the 19th. We have the revisions to the operating timetable due on the same date. We have the revisions to the railway passenger safety and handling rules. We have a draft complete and will be filed internally at the end of September. There is the Sawmill Brookfield crossing decommissioning, which is complete. And the centralized traffic control software and dispatch will be in place at the end of September. Additionally, we have the 25 light rail operators that are required for the expanded train service, and that training is also complete. So another part of the current phase that we're in is the safety certification process. The work completed to date is the inspection of all the installations and equipment, compliance reviews, hazard assessments, testing procedures, training procedures, design reviews, testing and commissioning. And the work that is remaining is the compilation, verification, and validation of all documentation. So this is a diagram that maybe not everybody will be able to read up on the screen there, but it indicates the two main flows of the certification process. And on the left side, we have the Transport Canada review process. And on the right-hand side, we have the contractual compliance review process. And so we're indicating that we're a good way through that. There are many items shown in green that are completed. There are other items in yellow which are in process. And we're expecting in the next couple of weeks to move into phase 1 of the safety certification, which is the systems acceptance testing. So as I said, we'll be moving into the following phase, which is systems acceptance testing. On completion of phase 1 of the safety certification process, the trains will operate as a trial expanded service in order to complete the systems acceptance testing. Phase 2 of the safety certification process includes final review of all safety documentation, processes and procedures, and will ultimately lead to the position where we're able to say we can start the full revenue service. The systems acceptance testing will take place at night without passengers, and its purpose is for the light rail operator familiarization with the new controls and signals and the whole new system, the identification of potential system issues, and also simulated incidents. It is anticipated that the SAT testing and safety certification processes will be complete by the last quarter 2014. At the end of the SAT process, we will be looking at transferring from the existing 2-car service into the expanded 4-car service. So there will be a switchover. That is planned to take place over 6 days. So a 6-day shutdown will be required in order to switch over from the existing system to the new system. During that period, new platform extenders will be installed and tactile warning strips will be altered to suit the new boarding location, as the new trains have 2 doors as opposed to the existing 3 doors on the bombardiers. There will be changes to the signage, and there will be redundant signals will be removed. And part of this 6-day shutdown will include 2 days of daytime systems acceptance testing. This will allow familiarization for the drivers to operate the trains during the day. During this period, Route 107 bus service will replace O-Train service during system switchover. And the start of the 4-car revenue service will be based on reducing the impact to O-Train customers with consideration for the Carleton University student schedule, red-black games, and other key events and operational criteria. So target dates for the new 4-car service are set for mid-November. Optimistically, we think that can be achieved. But if there is a need to extend the systems acceptance testing, then the next viable period is in the middle of December. So in terms of the work that is required for the final phase, operational preparedness, we have a schedule here that looks at a 4-week period from the day that we know that we'll be able to start the service. We will be working closely with OC on the preparation of advertising and communications material. There will also be the requirement for OC to prepare the schedules for drivers. There'll be the schedules for the maintenance of the new trains, and there'll be several other operational requirements that they will have to initiate at about 4 weeks prior to the official launch of the expanded service. And there we're indicating that we have the 6-day system switchover. We have a trial revenue service of 4 or 5 days, and then the Route 107 bus service being available for 10 to 11 days. But just to point out that this 4-week period, part of that is concurrent with the systems acceptance testing. So when we are getting more and more comfortable with the night running of the 4-car service, we will make a decision 20 days prior to the date that we expect to start the expanded service, and that's when we'll move into that final phase of operational preparedness. In terms of the full service considerations, the expanded service will be backed up by a parallel bus service for 4 to 5 days after it begins. This will compensate for possible slow orders, and we will have a parallel service available if unforeseen issues arise. Field technicians will be on standby to deal with unforeseen issues during system switchover and expanded service. And we want to make it clear that all new and expanded rail systems experience a break-in period which can affect the trains, the track infrastructure, the signal system, operators and customers. And so this may result in delays, in slow orders. It may result in maintenance work at night within the corridor to remedy any issues that have been discovered during the day. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Halder. Are there any questions for the presentation? Well, okay, received. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, now, any notices of motion? Okay, inquiries? Yeah. Okay, so Commissioner Bose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick inquiry about what is OC Transpo's interpretation of Transit Bylaw 2007-268, which is about the exclusive authority for passenger transportation. I'm not going to read the whole bylaw, or the whole inquiry. I'm not going to read the whole bylaw because it's in the inquiry, but specifically I'm referring to special events such as a Capital Fair shuttle to Rideau Carleton when there's no transit service that exists and when the organizers wish to run buses to connect to the transit system at no cost to OC Transpo. And at the bottom I've basically got, can a fare be charged to a traveler, and how would shuttles be allowed to connect to the transit system at key locations such as Greenboro or Trim Park and Ride?
Thank you, Commissioner Bose. Commissioner Tierney.
Great. Thanks, Madam Chair. This is more to Metrolinx, but I'll put it through our inquiry process. Why can't the ePRS balances be transferred to another existing Presto card or to a paper bus pass immediately? When the Presto card with a monthly pass is defective or stops working, why can't the balance be transferred to another new or existing card or paper pass immediately? And this stems from a situation that's occurred, and you guys have been very helpful on that, but it seems to be something that we'll have to deal with on a regular basis. It takes time to get all that balance transferred, and there's paperwork involved. So if you can get back to me through Metrolinx, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tierney. Any other inquiries? Seeing none, other business? Adjourned. Thank you all.